Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments directly on whatever platform you happen to be watching on, and they will show up here in our chat room. And we can then talk directly. And I hope that you're having a lovely Thursday. Um, I thought today I would talk a little bit about that time between the solstice and the coming of the new calendrical year, and how this can be perceived and interacted with as a magical time. I've seen a number of people posting in various places online about how this seems like a time out of time for them, not necessarily even spiritual posters, but that the days run together for them. They feel disconnected from the ordinary world, that they're in a special place. And historically speaking, anything that falls between tends to be this way. And in metaphysics, things that fall between are viewed this way. When we create the magic circle, we speak of it as a time out of time on the premise that it's between the worlds, between our physical world and the spiritual world, that it's a place between, a place where, well, a place of that chaos moment where all things are possible. And hello to Kazan in the chat room. How are you today, Kazan? Um, and that is also true for many different things that fall between one major landmark and the next, or one specific place and the next. Um, on a number of holidays, the moment between the setting of the sun at the beginning of the holiday and the rising of the sun the following morning is thought of as being a place between that is especially magical. Um, and so to see this period of time between the solstice, whether the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere or the southern summer solstice, and the coming of the new calendrical year as being a magical time is in its way a very traditional thing. I wouldn't say that it's a particularly traditional item because I don't know that historically this was a time um, that was thought of in quite those ways. Although if we look at like the 12 days of Christmas, there is some historical precedent for it. But today, a lot of people have this period of time off from school or work, and it kind of puts them in a special head place. Now, we were talking the other day about looking at the things that we want to release with the old year and manifest with the new. And I bring up this subject because it is a perfect time for this particular exercise. Because, in a manner of speaking, we're between the 2 years. And hello to Janet in the chat room. It's good to see you, Janet. Here on Midday with Reverend Don, we have only one more show in year 23 because Monday will be January 1st of year 24. And I strongly suspect I will be talking about New Year's traditions on that day. Um, and maybe some of the omens for the new year. Maybe we'll do a reading for the new year and see where that takes us. Um, New Year's Day historically is a very sacred occasion in all traditions and many different New Year's days. And in the modern pagan community, we tend to celebrate not just one, but numerous New Years through the year, even though we don't always quite understand that as the origin of some of the customs. Samhain, the origin of our liturgical year, was at one time also for the ancient Celtic peoples the origin of their ordinary calendrical year as well. Um, January 1st has a long history as New Year's Day. But for some, Yule was New Year's Day. April 1st and also the spring equinox were both New Year's days in certain areas, as was the fall equinox. And some of the traditions that we bring to all of these different occasions come from there having once been New Year's days. And hello to Mary in the chat room. It's good to see you, Mary. Um, and always with New Year's Day, you find this attitude of stepping between time, even if it's only in a short period around the holiday. If we look at April Fool's Day, for example, what makes it April Fool's Day? The fact that it was once a New Year's Day. Hello, Jason, in the chat room. And on New Year's Day, the ordinary rules did not apply. Um, the rule of chaos was commonly considered to apply. This is also partly why um, we have many of the Samhain traditions that we have, and why at one time our Yuletide traditions were a lot more like our Samhain traditions than most people observe today. But if you look, you'll still see them. Um, at New Year's Day, one of the things that we observe is that idea of the chaos moment. And I've spoken about the chaos moment before. And every moment in life is potentially a chaos moment. And what do we mean by that? What do we mean by chaos? Chaos is the absence of order, the absence of pattern. And what do you have when you have no order or pattern? You have potential. You have the potential for everything to happen. That's what the Fool card in the tarot means. It is that moment when you can go in any direction um, because you haven't set a particular direction yet, and all of them are still possible. And Mary says, I love that pin and tie. Very nice. Thank you, Mary. I'm notorious for my love of ties. I did last year when I was a little deeper in my health problems. I did without ties for a little while, but I really quite enjoy them. I find them an artistic expression. And one of the things you'll notice, I have a lot of paisley ties. And the thing that separates them in many cases is the background color. For example, with this one, the background color is a burgundy color with a silver gray pattern. And I also have this very similar paisley tie with a black pattern, a black background and a silver gray pattern. And I love to see the different effects that these colors make. Um, and of course, I also have many tie pins. This tie pin, it's just a little pentacle, a little pentagram in a pentacle form in purple and white. And when I wear it, it's usually when I'm wearing either purple or sometimes gray. And it's very straightforward, but I quite enjoy it. Hello to Jasmine in the chat room. It's good to see you, Jasmine. And I like to put different things together. As an artist, I find it to be a very creative expression. I am not a person who could be content just throwing on whatever happened to be nearest in the wardrobe. Um, I love putting the different colors together, the different designs together. Hello to Christine in the chat room. It's good to see you, Christine. Um, and to me, that's a major creative enterprise. And I guess that it's worked out very well that I do so much video because I always have an occasion to to engage in putting together interesting outfits. But I just would not be happy if it were not interesting. But getting back to the chaos moment and looking at how magic applies, and hello to Renee and Vanessa in the chat room. It's good to see you both. The chaos moment and how magic applies to everyday life. What I was just saying about putting the colors together, putting the outfits together. When I get up in the morning, that's all a moment of chaos, a moment where I could go in any direction I wish. And until I've made the first choice, that direction is not set. The same is true of most things in life, and certainly in magic. Until you've taken the magical act, your magical choices are all over the place. Once you have made the decision, you've set a course. You're no longer in the chaos moment. And this is true also for our New Year's celebrations. As we start that new year, we begin with a completely fresh slate in many ways, metaphysically speaking. And how we direct that slate or allow it to be directed in many cultures around the world is a very ritually important item. One of the things that I've always been a great believer in is the idea of first footing. Now, this can be a more complex or a less complex custom, depending on exactly how you observe it. But what it comes down to is the first person that you encounter on New Year's Day is an omen for that day. And so, too, the various things that you do during New Year's Day. So, on New Year's Day, I always try to do a little bit of all those different things I would like to do during the year so that I have um, set the engine of the year in the direction I want it to go. Um, and this is true also for the foods we eat at New Year's. And it's why we have many of the New Year's customs we have. It's the idea of programming that chaos moment, taking it and setting a direction. And my mother was a great believer in always eating cabbage on New Year's Day. And cabbage is associated with prosperity. And um, I believe this is a fairly long historical connection, but also during my mother's lifetime, the term cabbage was often used as a slang term for money. And so consuming cabbage on New Year's Day was intended to keep money flowing through the new year. That's one of many New Year's food customs, and they are across a very wide range of patterns. Your family may have very different New Year's food patterns from my family, and that's perfectly fine. But most historical, traditional New Year's foods are intended to promote prosperity through that new year. And they come down again to that idea of the chaos moment when all things are possible and setting that moment to go in the direction you want it to go. So, as you consider those things that you want to release with year 23, and those things that you want to program into and draw to you in year 24, think a little bit about how you're going to use New Year's Day to help program that change. I would say it's a wonderful day for manifesting the things you want in the new year. Um, and that um, New Year's Eve is probably a good day for releasing the ones from the old year, as well as the time between now and then. And I would focus very heavily on programming your year for what you want to see in it. Now, of course, the universe always takes a hand in these things. Um, and that's why we have so many omens around New Year's Day. And I mentioned first footing as one of them. There are many others. But that's so the universe can tell you what it has planned for you in the coming year, which may not be what you have planned. But there's usually room for both. And to me, these are some of the reasons New Year's Day is very important. And Kazan says, what is the difference between which New Year on October 31st, November 1st, and New Year on January 1st? The biggest difference between these things is the cultures that they come from. I usually describe the Samhain New Year as the liturgical New Year. Um, it's when we religiously and spiritually think of our year beginning, along with the winter season, which traditionally begins at Samhain. And we observe a lot of customs based on that thought. But January 1st is the calendrical New Year. It's the New Year the rest of the world recognizes. And, we're one of many minority religions that observe both of these things. Um, there are many religious and cultural groups that have a traditional New Year that's different from January 1st that they still recognize. But also, because they live in this world, they recognize the January 1st New Year as well. When I created the Corellian calendar 30 odd years ago, one of the things that I did is I timed it to the January 1st New Year to make it practical and usable in everyday life, because I'm not a great believer in things you can't use in your actual life. Um, so to me, it's spiritually, we may think of year 23 as beginning in Samhain, but I really think of it actually beginning on January 1st. And that period between is a little bit of a cusp between the old year and the new. And it certainly has been for me, because I found that in October, I did experience a very significant improvement in my health and change of energy in my life, um, which I would um, tie to in November of this year. It really bore its fruit. I would take that to go along with the changing of the liturgical year, and but I still place great importance on the changing of the calendrical year. And it was really at the end of October that I found that change. Now, Janet says, my mom used to cook cabbage and ham with a pure silver dime to bring prosperity. And don't worry, she wrapped the dime in cheesecloth so no one got hurt. And that's a very traditional thing to do. And again, the cabbage and the ham also are both for prosperity and good fortune. The silver dime, I would imagine, has um, both that aspect and also a blessing for whoever finds it in the dish, which is a very traditional thing to do also, to include a token of some sort in the ritual dish for the occasion. And the person who finds that token generally is considered to be specially blessed in the coming year. Sometimes people will have several tokens with different meanings. Um, but of course, you have to be careful that that everyone knows they're there and nobody accidentally swallows them. So we don't see that one quite as much as we used to, but traditionally it's a very big thing. Now, the other thing about dimes that I have found um, is that dimes very often also indicate the influence of the ancestors in our lives. When you find a random dime, it says that the ancestors are strong around you, and it references your connection to them, and perhaps also a need to talk to them at that moment. Whereas if you find a random penny, that's just good luck. But the dime specifically references the ancestors, and so it may also have this meaning in that custom. But I think these customs are wonderful. I think that maintaining them is a very important thing, both for cultural continuity and also simply because it's also fascinating. I think it's fascinating to take part in ancient rituals. And these different dishes that we eat at New Year's, in many cases, are quite ancient um, in one form or another in practice that people have continued to consume, sometimes even when everything else in their culture has changed. And of course, they're different depending on where you come from, what your background is, and many different families have their own individual traditions um, that are not necessarily even dependent on their cultural background, but on their personal background. And I think that's just as important. There's the famous story that Sir Edward loves to tell this story about the origin of customs. It's the family which always made a point to cut the end of the bone off the drumsticks of the turkey every year when they created the holiday turkey. And they always did this. Um, and one year, one of the grandchildren asked, "Why do we do this?" And no one in the family knew. They all said, "Well, this is just a custom we've had since time immemorial," uh, except for grandmother, who said, "Well, actually, it's because years ago when I was cooking the family turkeys, I didn't have a pan big enough to fit the whole thing, and I had to trim it to fit. That was the origin of the custom." And that's a perfectly legitimate custom. It shows respect for your ancestors to continue such things. Um, but sometimes when we look to the origin of customs, they're not always what we think they are. Now, one of the interesting things about many of our customs is that sometimes they're not actually associated quite with the holiday that we think they are in their origin. For example, La Befana, who in the United States is commonly thought of as the Christmas witch. I believe originally as the Epiphany witch in Italy. She is more associated with January 6th, but it's generally agreed her actual origin was the New Year's witch, the Roman goddess Striga, I believe, who was a goddess of good fortune. And every year at New Year's, which fell on January 1st after a certain point in Roman history, this goddess was associated with sweeping out the energies of the old year and sweeping in the energies of the new year. And later, when Italy became predominantly Christian, she transformed into La Befana, but continued to be honored and carried forward and got moved first to Epiphany and then later in North America to Christmas, neither of which is her original holiday. Um, and that is one of the interesting little pieces of information that you find when you study these things. But wherever you celebrate La Befana, she's um, a charming historical figure. And to me, I think of her very much in the same class of historical figures that we have the Halloween Witch and Mrs. Santa Claus, the elderly goddess of the winter time, um, who you see very strongly in Celtic mythology, the Cúlach, um, and who is still really quite prominent in our modern mythology today through those different figures. Um, and um, Very important to this time of change. And because that figure of the crone and also the figure of the sorcerer are both near the end of physical years, they're very much, again, connected to the idea of the chaos moment, very strongly connected to magic, very strongly connected to taking control of fate and setting the direction it's going to go in. And again, I want to encourage you to take this time between the solstice and the calendrical new year and set the course of your own fate in the coming year. Again, think of those things that you don't want to carry forward and think of those things you do want to carry forward and the things that you want to manifest in the new year. And as we come to the change of the year, take the magical actions to make these things happen, to bring them into reality. And this is what magic is all about. Magic is based on the idea that we absolutely influence the universe around us. As I always say, we do it unconsciously every day that we're alive, but we strive to become conscious of it so that we can do it more deliberately. And this is one of those moments of the year when it's especially um, appropriate to do that, when the energies of the universe are moving in that direction already. And so by attuning ourselves to it, our act in taking control of our fate is strengthened by the fact that we're moving in kind with the universe rather than just moving at a random time. It's not to say you can't move at a random time, we do this all the time. I love to say that magic is of no use to you if you can't call upon it when your car is skidding off the road. Um, but certainly, if you are moving in synchronicity with the energies of the universe, your work will be strengthened by that. So, end of the year, perfect time for setting your hopes and your fortune for the new year. And once again, I'm going to ask you to take a moment with me and just think about all those things that you want to leave behind with year 23. And just think of them one by one. Think of them in your mind and will that they are not coming forward with you. And at a later point, I would recommend writing them down on a piece of paper and burning them to send them away, or any of a number of other magical acts that you might take. Think of them, see them clearly, and release them. And then, when you have done that, take a moment and think of the things that you want to come into your life in year 24. How do you want to see year 24 be different? What do you want to have in year 24? Think of those things and see them strongly in your mind and will that they will come to you. Draw them to you. And again, at a later point, you may want to write them down on a piece of paper and burn them ritually or manifest them in some other way. And in particular, again, I would recommend doing this for releasing on New Year's Eve and manifesting on New Year's Day. And take advantage of this moment in time to attune yourself to that energy of change. So think of those things that you wish to see come to you, see them clearly, and know that as a magical person, as you pull them to you, you already have them. And behold, Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to help us to release those things that we wish to let go of and to manifest those things that we wish to come to us. In this moment, beloved ones, we thank you. So mote it be. Now, tomorrow will be our last day with Midday for Rev Don in year 23 Aquarius. And Monday will be our first day. And I'm looking forward to that. And it will actually be New Year's Day. So it will be a lovely telecast. You know, years ago, when Living the Wiccan Life, the talk show, first premiered in maybe 2005, Lady Crystal and I did a show on New Year's customs, which is still up at Magic TV if you should like to see it sometime. I looked very different then, so did she, as you might imagine, with such an expanse of time between. But we talked about many of the different interesting things about New Year's customs. And probably I'll be talking about some of these things on Monday. I'll be talking about manifesting that new year on Monday. And I'm very much looking forward to it. Now, tonight, you can see me together with Reverend Mary Hawk and Reverend Brian Ellicott on Tarot Thursday here on Pagan World TV. And we'll be doing a triple header of the three of us, which is not what we normally do. So it will be a special occasion. I hope you'll join us for that. And I think it will be a lovely time. So with that, I see that we're more or less at the end of our half hour. So let us close with our prayer, as we normally do. And Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for everything that you have brought us in year 23. Both those things that were pleasant and those things that were challenging. And we ask you to help us to carry forward the good and helpful things and leave behind the more dramatic lessons of this year. We ask you to help us to set our goals and our path in year 24. We ask you to help us to be mindful of that which we truly want and how to manifest it. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we're very thankful for your presence in our life now and always. We pray that we shall go forward together hand in hand, knowing you are always with us, but from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always, and I will see you again tomorrow.